Gisteraand het die president 'n omvattende stimulusplan aangekondig. Steven Tou verfris gou ons geheus.
Soos die president self gesê het, dit is 'n geskiedkundige ekonomiese ingryping. 130 miljard rand van die 500 miljard rand plan sal uit die verstelling en herprioritisering van die huidige begroting kom. Die oorblywende 370 miljard rand sal die regering bymekaar moet skraap uit plastieke bronne soos die werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds en buitelandse lenings soos by die internasionale monetaire fonds en die BRICS ontwikkelingsbank. Die lys van bronne vir die geld is maar kort, maar die lys waarop dit spandeer gaan word is lank. So byvoorbeeld sal 'n spesiale korona-noodtoelaag van R350 per maand vir 6 maande aan behoeftiges uitbetaal word wat werkloos is en geen ander staatstoelaag ontvang nie. So ook word kindertoelaas vir 6 maande basies verdubbel na R945 per maand en ander toelaag vermeerder met R250. Ander uitgawes sluit in 20 miljard rand vir die direkte mediese kostes om die pandemie te beveg, soos toetse en hospitaal-onkostes, as ook 20 miljard rand aan munisipaliteite vir die voorsiening van water, sanitasie en ander bystandsdienste. 100 miljard rand gaan ook gebruik word vir werkskepping en werksbeskerming. Die regering loods ook 'n 200 miljard rand noodleningsskema en waarborg daardeur sekere lenings aan maatskappye. Die groot banke vorm ook deel van die skema.
Ek praat nou met professor Michael Sachs van Wits. Hy is 'n voormalige hoof van die Tesourie se begrotingskantoor en het ook die kabinet oor die nuwe stimulusplan geadviseer. Professor Sachs, is 500 billion rand enough? Certain stakeholders did ask for more.
I think the key question is, can we deliver on the 500 billion that has been announced? So we need to worry about our capacity to deliver on our commitments more than setting out astronomical numbers that we aren't able to deliver on. So I think Cyril Ramaphosa came with a bold set of choices, displayed leadership. There was a proper, a good response to the announcements in the market. So I think it's a good start. But as this crisis unfolds and becomes more entrenched, we may need more. But for now, my view is that this is a very good start.
There's still some questions about where the money will come from, but can we brace ourselves for an increase in tax?
Well, if you have an increase in debt today, that usually means you're going to have an increase in tax tomorrow. I don't think that it is really possible to hike taxes right now in the midst of the lockdown when incomes are under so much pressure. But I certainly think in the years ahead, increasing the burden of taxation government will be forced to do in order to deal with the hangover of debt from this crisis.
In the document you prepared, you also mentioned as an option a solidarity wealth tax and certain prescribed assets. Are those options, do you think, still on the table?
Well, I think a kind of solidarity levy is certainly on the table. There's not a very clear design framework for that. As I say, I think if government tried to impose tax right now in the midst of the lockdown, it is unlikely to get much bang for its buck. So I think that the solidarity levy or some kind of special tax to pay just for this crisis and the response to the crisis will definitely be on the agenda as we move forward. I am not a proponent of prescribed assets as such. I think that there is a need for government to be having a very robust discussion with local pension funds and those who sit on large pools of capital in South Africa to see how those funds are going to contribute to funding the burden that government faces. Prescribed assets is one kind of instrument that seeks to achieve that, but it's not the only way forward.
We've heard about reprioritization of the national budget. That's your old wheelhouse. Where do you suspect the cuts will be made?
Well, I think what we would probably be looking at is not cuts to budgets, but the shifting of budgets that normally would be available for other purposes to finance the most immediate needs thrown up by the crisis. So, for example, there's a lot of money that government builds on capacity building. Nobody would deny that capacity building is a fundamentally important government activity, both for itself and for broader society. But we could say, let's postpone all of our capacity building workshops until next year and use that money this year to finance social grants. So that's probably about 5 billion rand, on the order of that. Other things that could be thought of is any kind of capital programs that can be postponed without inflicting permanent damage on the public finances. Obviously, those capital programs that are related to the crisis response need to go ahead. But a lot of house construction, for instance, financed by the public sector, could be postponed until next year. The housing budget is about 40 billion. So there are a lot of ways in which Treasury could shift funds, not on a permanent basis, but just for this year. As we deal with this crisis, we need the social grants to be topped up more than we need, for instance, capacity building to go ahead.
If we do go to the IMF or the BRICS Bank or other lending institutions, that will increase our debt to GDP ratio. Wouldn't that then place us into a debt trap or debt spiral?
Well, the debt to GDP ratio will rise as long as there's a fiscal deficit. So the fiscal deficit will drive the debt to GDP ratio. The advantage of going to the IMF or the BRICS Bank or the World Bank or other official creditors is not that you reduce your debt or increase your debt. It's that the interest you pay on the debt is much lower than the interest rate you can get in the market. So at the moment, South Africa, the government is borrowing at an interest rate of about 10% for a 10-year borrowing. Whereas you can get money from the World Bank, you can borrow money from the international institutions at something closer to 1%. So it's not the total amount of debt that you're increasing by going to the IMF. You still have the same amount of debt, but perhaps you can finance it at a lower rate. So certainly the big issue then that South Africa will need to think about is what are the other costs that come with that low rate of debt? And that may involve conditionalities on our policies going forward. And that is something that we need to think about and talk about. I expect that this first tranche of funding from international institutions will come with hardly any conditionalities. In other words, it will be very cheap money without much conditionality. And given the circumstances that we face, we should be jumping at that.
Just very shortly, Professor, is the government doing the right thing by keeping the SAA on life support?
It's a difficult one for all the state-owned companies. On the one hand, SAA is bankrupt. On the other hand, you've got 5,000 people who face unemployment as a result of that bankruptcy, and you would rather deal with that unemployment problem at a later stage, not in the midst of a national lockdown, adding to the social consequences of the crisis. So while over the next year or two, you certainly need to look at winding down SAA, there is a case for providing some support in the short to medium term, particularly for the workers who are thrown into unemployment as a result of that collapse.
Professor Sachs, thank you so much.